Thank you very much. Next, an autistic student accused of hacking into US government computers tells this programme he fears for his own life if he's extradited to America. Lauri Love, who has Asperger's, is accused of stealing huge amounts of data from US agencies, including the Federal Reserve, the Department of Defense, NASA and the FBI. American authorities want the 31-year-old to stand trial in the States over charges of cyber hacking. His lawyers say it could result in a sentence of up to 99 years in jail if convicted. Lauri Love is here this morning, and in a moment we'll speak to him. But first, let's take a look back at how all this began. Jim Reid has this report.
3 years ago, someone posing as a UPS courier turned up at a family home in Suffolk. 28-year-old Lauri Love was called downstairs to sign for the package. It was all a deception, a police sting to catch a man now accused of hacking into the FBI, the US Central Bank and America's Missile Defense Agency.
Greetings, citizens of the world. We are anonymous.
It's suspected Love was part of Anonymous, a secretive network of hackers which targets governments and companies.
Anonymous are a strange group. They tend to hack not so much because they want to gain from their hacking. They do it because one of their beliefs is that all corporate information should be in the public domain. So if people are storing personal data and private data, they want to release it. If they think people are behaving badly, they want to expose that.
2 weeks ago today, a line was crossed. 2 weeks ago today, Aaron Swartz was killed.
Love is accused of being one of 4 anonymous hackers behind Operation Last Resort, an online protest which followed the suicide of a high-profile internet activist.
With Aaron's death, we can wait no longer. The time has come to show the United States Department of Justice and its affiliates the true meaning of infiltration.
As payback, it's alleged Anonymous broke into computer systems belonging to US agencies, including the FBI, the US Army and NASA. The Americans say they have evidence Lauri Love himself downloaded thousands of staff records, including credit card details. He allegedly wrote to other hackers with the message, "Yes, I am invincible." There is no suggestion, though, that he made money from this or that any individual was harmed.
This is particularly serious, but I think it's more the embarrassment issue. The more people want to send a message saying if you try and break into our systems, then we're going to come after you. And certainly there's no reason why anybody who calls himself a hacker or even a security researcher should be getting into things like NASA and the Federal Reserve. It's not the sort of thing you should be doing.
The US Army Investigation Command said they traced some of the attacks back through an internet address in Romania, paid for by a PayPal account linked to Love. After his arrest, he was questioned by Britain's National Crime Agency, but he's never been charged in the UK, and the investigation here now appears to be over. Instead, he's wanted by US authorities for accessing US computers in 3 different states.
There's a war on whistleblowers and hacktivists ongoing in the United States, and I don't think war is too heavy a word for that.
Love's supporters claim if he's extradited, he could be sentenced to 99 years in a US prison. Other hackers in his position say they've been forced into a plea deal, a reduced sentence of 10 years or more to avoid going to trial. In the UK, the maximum sentence for a computer crime like this is less than 3 years.
I think it's barely possible that Lauri receive any kind of trial in the United States. The pressures to agree to a plea bargain are enormous anyway, and Lauri is facing charges in 3 separate US court districts. That makes it almost impossible to go to trial. So would he receive a fair trial? No, he wouldn't receive any trial at all.
Lauri Love then is now fighting extradition. At a court hearing in July, his defence team argued he suffers from depression and Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism. Lawyers for the US said he was using that as a shield to escape justice. On the face of it, this case looks similar to Gary McKinnon's, another alleged British hacker diagnosed with Asperger's. His decade-long battle against extradition to the US ended in 2012 when Theresa May, then the Home Secretary, blocked the US request on health grounds.
Mr McKinnon's extradition would give rise to such a high risk of him ending his life.
After that, the law was changed. It's now judges who decide these things, not politicians. The idea was to rebalance an extradition deal with the United States that many felt was unfair. The Love case is likely to be the first real test of a new law called the Forum Bar. The judge will make her decision public on September 16th.
And we can talk exclusively to Lauri Love now. Good morning to you. Thank you for coming on the programme.
Thanks for having me.
How do you respond in broad terms to these accusations?
Well, what I'm hoping is if the extradition is refused, I'll have the opportunity to respond in court, which is the way these things are done. The problem for me is there's been no evidence provided over the 3 years that I faced these allegations. So if the forum bar has successfully changed the law, then we can continue the process under a UK court.
Right. How difficult has it been then to try and fight this when you haven't been presented with any particular evidence against you?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to face very serious allegations for 3 years and not have any due process. Ideally, in a society, if somebody is accused of something, they're charged, they can see the evidence, they can formulate a defence, and they can have their day in court. The issue is if I were to be extradited to America, there'd be no day in court, as was alluded to earlier, because I'd be made an offer I couldn't refuse in terms of coercive plea bargaining.
Right, OK. Why do you say a potential plea bargain would be coercive?
Well, the difference in how the charges are presented. So the legal experts from the United States have calculated that I could be facing up to 99 years if there are 3 trials and the charges are presented in a certain way. The Department of Justice then makes an offer where they'll present different charges and they'll recommend a lower sentence. The problem is 19 out of 20 people take this offer. And I think that maybe demonstrates that there's some problems with that system.
Why?
Because if 19 out of 20 people never have a trial, I'm not sure if that's really due process, I'm not sure if it's really justice.
Can you get your head round this figure of 99 years?
It's quite absurd. I mean, any more than a few decades, you don't really see an end to it, and because of there's very poor conditions in US prisons for people with mental health difficulties, I think that I would be at risk of dying in some unfortunate way.
Right. That's a serious fear for you, isn't it?
Yeah, and this was argued in the extradition hearing, and that because of depression and Asperger's, and because the US prisons they're not quite as competent as the UK prisons in providing therapeutic assistance to people in suicide risk. You tend to be put in a smock and kept in a small room by yourself. Here in the UK, they would attempt to make contact with families and to try and support the person who's at risk.
The barrister acting for the CPS during your extradition hearing accused you of using your disabilities as a shield. What's your response to that?
I mean, it was quite upsetting. It kind of evinced that they didn't have a better argument to make, that it was offensive to the legal experts who are very eminent in their field, and it's offensive to me that someone who has faced difficulties due to mental health for all my life, and reactions like that are part of the reason why there's such a stigma around it that stops people getting the support they need. So,
I mean, you will have heard me read the message out from a viewer earlier that said, put the autism, put the Asperger's to one side. If you don't do the alleged crime, then.
Well, again, that's a matter for the court, because in a court, discussion can be made of motives, and as was mentioned in the introduction, the reason we're having this conversation is because there was a tragic death of a young man with amazing potential and talent, and he died because of this coercive plea bargaining system. So I'm hoping that if the extradition is refused, it will give some opportunity to people that are promoting reform in the US to make some progress.
Let me read some more messages from people watching you around the country. Zilla says, it is so important to understand the effect of stress on people with autism. Help us to keep finding the answers. Tia says, of course Lauri Love should not be extradited. It's so sad, he's autistic. There is no need for harshness. Jamie says, I have 100% support for Lauri. The system is criminal, not Lauri. And Tony on WhatsApp, Lauri should be subject to British law. The crime was allegedly committed in the UK, and therefore our laws should apply.
I mean, I do think there is a question of sovereignty here. In the UK, we have a pretty functional court system and a very good prison system, and the US shouldn't feel that it can step in when it doesn't like the results that are being had here.
Yeah, I mean, is that how you see it, the US stepping in? I mean, you know we have an extradition treaty between Britain and the US. Lots of people have complained about it. Nobody seems to be able to change it, despite campaigns by various people. It was signed by the then Home Secretary David Blunkett years ago. He's made comments about it since. That is the way it is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, efforts have stalled at reforming it. It is unbalanced. The US hasn't needed to present any evidence in the extradition hearing, and people... common people will say this is quite absurd, that I could be taken out of this country without anything being proven. I hope the reforms will eventually be successful, and if the extradition is refused, then it might help promote those courses again.
Are you a hacker?
Yeah, I describe myself as a hacker. A hacker is someone who uses technology, takes it apart and puts it together in interesting ways. I currently work as an information security consultant, so I help companies keep their networks secure. And I also work promoting new technologies such as blockchain technologies that could create a better financial system.
Have you hacked illegally?
That again would be a question for court.
Right. Have you ever hacked under the banner of Anonymous, the collective group of hacktivists, as they're known?
I mean, part of the idea of Anonymous is to not be affiliated in a name sense. So if anyone said that they were a member of Anonymous, they might have missed the point.
OK. People will read into that answer what they will. In terms of the 3 years that this has been hanging over you, what impact has it had on you? What impact has it had on your family, your parents?
So I really feel for my parents who have to worry and have the stress of this. It's very difficult for them. For myself, it's exacerbated my eczema, and I quite often scratch my face and it bleeds, and I'll have infections. I don't get good night's sleep very often. Stress compounds other immune system problems. So it would be nice to have less stress, but this is an important process that may potentially result in some good, so that keeps me going.
Do you have any steer from your legal team about what the outcome of the extradition hearing is going to be? We will hear next week. Do you have? I mean, presumably you're hopeful, you're optimistic. Of course, that's the natural human instinct. But
I'm guardedly optimistic on the basis that the US didn't present a case and they didn't have any witnesses of their own. We had 14 expert witnesses on US prison conditions, on mental health, and on sentencing disparity between the UK and the US. Not very much effort was made apart from by the barrister to cast doubt on my mental health conditions. So I would hope that the judge has enough to make the correct decision to refuse the extradition.
This tweet from Cassius: the extradition treaty with the US is one-sided. Their sentencing is ridiculous, but I don't think Asperger's is an excuse, Cassius's word, but have a trial in England. Ian says if the hacker has broken UK law, prosecute here. If not, do nothing. C text to say this: I don't think he should face extradition. Instead, the protection of the various sites should be increased, and if he can get in them, so can others. An anonymous text: Mr. Love should be treated with compassion because he's ill. I would suggest that his talents be given a positive outlet and he be involved in computer security, which you already are, aren't you?
I mean, there's a serious point here in that if these networks were compromised, that's a serious problem for America, and it's a problem that can't be solved by putting people in small boxes. It's a problem that's an engineering problem, and it's solved by increasing the literacy of people in computer security. And this is something that I'm doing in my work with Hacker House, is helping the next generation have the skills to build more secure systems.
Hillary tweets: I'm sorry, autism is no defence against wrongdoing. And this from Bill: guilty or not, the potential sentence is enough to keep Lauri here. We will report back on the hearing next week. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.